So, my talk today will be on Startupping 2.0, which is lessons learned, birthing, and building-led startups. First, though, I want to tell an anecdote about startup culture in Silicon Valley. As you see here, a bunch of T-shirts with mock-ups of the graphics of the companies that I started. There's a tradition in Silicon Valley, and it's been going on for quite a while now. In a world where starting a technology company has changed dramatically, as I'll talk about today, one thing has remained constant, and that is starting a company is all about a T-shirt. People fight for them, they prize them, and for better or worse, long after a company is gone, their ghosts survive in the form of T-shirts that people continue to wear. You should see my closet is full of these things. Luckily, none of my companies are ghosts yet, and so all of these T-shirts are somewhat that. And where's the next slide? Here we go. Sorry about that. I've seen startups from the inside out, outside in, and basically all over the place. So let me tell you a little bit about my experience. I started out as an engineer in a couple of startups in the Valley. The last one was e.day, which was acquired by Sun Microsystems. I then went on to found 3 companies. For the introduction, first one was OneList, which is now Yahoo Groups, acquired by Yahoo in 2000. Second one was Bloglines, which was acquired by SGs in 2003. And the third one is Startupping. And Startupping I started earlier this year as a resource for entrepreneurs to talk amongst themselves and share information. Being an entrepreneur oftentimes is a very lonely business. And so I would get emails from entrepreneurs asking me questions, and a recurring theme was basically, there's no place on the internet where we can talk amongst ourselves and share information. It's really the genesis of Startupping, which I'm working on now. In addition to the companies that I founded, I'm also an advisor to 3 companies, one True Media, Detector, and Wasabi. So basically the theme of all of these companies is that they're small, consumer-focused, web services-based firms. If you want to start a hardware company or a database company, I'm probably not the guy to talk to, and this probably isn't going to be a useful presentation for you. So, I'll be talking about the various aspects of starting a company and current best thinking and best practices about it. But first I want to give a brief overview of some of the changes that have taken place over the last 30 years. We've really seen an incredible revolution in how companies are started and built. If you look at the graphics I have, it goes from IBM, which is a huge monolithic company that had hundreds of thousands of employees, took a lot of money to create and a lot of time to create, to the 1970s and 80s, where you started to see companies built in garages. It was really the garage creation that came into its own back then. And then what we have now are what I call the kitchen table web businesses, where all you need is a laptop, a kitchen table, and your cat to start a company. And there have been several trends that have made this possible. What you're seeing is many employees for the old companies to small virtual teams these days, leveraging the power of the internet, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. Taking lots of money to start a company to virtual bootstrapping. Whereas in the 90s, for example, it was common for internet companies to raise millions and millions of dollars. eGroups, my company, raised $48 million before we were acquired. Whereas contrast that with Bloglines, my last company before Startupping, we did it start to finish $200,000. Previously, you'd see long release cycles, and now you're seeing rapid iterations. You see really taking advantage of the internet to push out new features, new bug releases on almost a daily basis, whereas before, with a software product, you'd be talking about a year release cycle. Everything's much more nimble and agile these days. And finally, the rise of free and standard software over custom tools before. It used to be that you have to roll your own solution. Even in the 90s, if you wanted a database for your software or for your internet service, you really have to do a lot of programming on your own. These days, while it's still not perfect, there are a lot of free software solutions, and that helps with some of the other aspects of business, being cheap, rapid iteration, etc. So before you start, you need an idea. And the first thing you need to do is what I call identify a genuine pain point. So it's easy for us nerds, and I'm a nerd, to get infatuated with technology and then try to build a business around that. I look at it as the opposite. You really need to look for a problem, and preferably one that you yourself are suffering from, and use that as a basis for starting a company. I'll give you examples for OneList and Bloglines. OneList, which is a free mailing list service. Back in 1997, I wanted to start a mailing list, but in order to do that, you had to have a computer connected to the internet, you had to run some arcane software. It was very, very difficult, and once you did that, it was a real challenge to get people to sign up to it. So OneList was my idea as how to make that easier. I was solving a problem for myself, but at that time I figured if I had that problem, other people would have the same problem. Bloglines, in 2003 when I was working on it, I had a bookmark list basically of 100 sites that I go to every day that I was checking on, sites that I was interested in, friends, websites, news sites, things like that. And I'd have to go to that list every day just to see what changes have taken place. And that list was only getting longer, and the process was only taking longer. And that was got me thinking, how can I solve this process? Bloglines was that. Bloglines is a newsreader that lets you subscribe to websites. So instead of having to go to them every day and check for new content, the new content is pulled into Bloglines all in one place, and it only shows you new items. So it really speeds up the web browsing experience. Again, my thought process with that is, I'm solving a problem that I have, and if I have it, other people probably have it as well. Another thing you must have when starting a company is passion for the idea. Doing a startup is hard. I cannot tell you how hard it is to do. It will consume your life. It takes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years on end. It is unending pain. I mean, there's lots of good things with it too, but I've got to tell you, it's very, very difficult. And that's if you hope it's very difficult, because that means you're being successful. So you have to have a passion for the idea. If you don't have a passion for the idea, it just isn't going to work. You're just not going to be able to muster the energy to deal with this thing for years, 24 hours a day. Third thing I talk about is you must have a business model. And it doesn't mean you have to execute on one initially, and it doesn't mean it has to be very unique, but you should be thinking about the business model initially. There are two main business models for internet startups these days. There's the free ad-supported based revenue model, and then there's what's called the freemium model, which means as part of your services are free, and then you upsell additional services. You definitely should have an idea of what your business model is going to be before you start your company. Fourth, you should become educated. And what's great about the 21st century as opposed to the late 90s is that there's so many resources on the internet these days to take advantage of. There's so many blogs of venture capitalists, of angel investors, of other entrepreneurs. There are resources like Startuping, Y Combinator Hacker News, for example. Just tremendous resources. Read those. Get educated. The more you know, the better off you'll be. I mean, part of the thing is you don't want to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. You want to be able to make new and exciting mistakes instead. And then finally, this seems counterintuitive, but get another job. Starting a company is the riskiest thing you can ever do. And so part of my thought process is once you've decided to do a startup, try to mitigate that risk as much as possible. And one way of doing that is to moonlight. It's what I did with OneList, for example. We launched OneList in January 1998, but I had a mortgage. I had a house. I could not afford to stop working at my regular job while I was doing this very risky startup. So what did I do? I would work at my regular job 8 or 10 hours a day, and then I would come home and I would work on OneList for another 8 hours a day, and then all day on the weekends. It's a horrible way to live, but if you don't have the money to just jump both feet into it, you can do it. And it is a good way to mitigate the risk. So one of the important aspects about starting a company is assembling your team. And that's really one of the things that has changed dramatically over the last 7 or 8 years. One of the things I like to tell people to do is to outsource as much as possible. There have been the rise of several different outsourcing solutions, as I talk about here, or mention here. Elance, Rent-A-Coder, and Mechanical Turk are just 3 options for creating a virtual team, really harnessing these internet services to outsource some of the work. And I'll give you a couple of examples of how I've done that. I'm not a graphic designer by any means. I can't draw at all. When I needed a logo for startuping, I just went and put a bid out on Elance, or put a project up for a bid on Elance. I got 12 bids in 24 hours, and I picked somebody from, I think,